So I saw a post and it said, if your profession has an appreciation week, you are not being paid enough. Nurses Week, an annual celebration of the U.S. nurses that takes place in the first week of every May. And can I just immediately point out that this is also the exact same week as Teachers Appreciation Week? Like, are you actually kidding me? Do we think that it's a coincidence that the two historically female-dominated professions that are like overworked and underpaid and have to bend over backwards and are like mostly like caring, giving type professions, that they have to share a week? There are 52 weeks in a year, my friend. But we should share? I think that's really actually all we really need to say in this video. But it's me, so I'll say more. Let's begin with the history of the presenting issue, aka Nurses Week, shall we? Nurses Week was first celebrated in 1954, marking the 100th anniversary of Florence Nightingale's mission to Crimea. Pretty immediately, we are off to a really bad start because the whole thing is centered around Florence, who I have absolutely no love for. Stay tuned for a future video to hear more thoughts on that. She is a mess. We need a new mascot desperately. Leave your ideas for who you think we can replace her with down below. I'm thinking like someone with like Laverne from Scrubs, that vibe.
Doug wanted me to give this patient 500,000 milligrams of morphine. I thought I'd check with you before I killed a man.
Now, back to 1954, where the general vibe in nursing is as follows. Nursing was primarily viewed as a profession for women. It's like an job, right? Not a bad job at all, but also not like a super well-respected or like professional job, and definitely was more of a soft skills versus science type skills that we have today. However, as healthcare itself evolved and was getting more specialized, nursing specialties were beginning to emerge and develop alongside of those. And slowly but surely, the world of healthcare was realizing nurses, by golly, might have a little bit of a brain up here, and they might want to take advantage of that and the shift of nursing becoming more of a science was like picking up speed. The American Nurses Association, or the ANA, was pushing for a more autonomous nursing practice and the recognition of nurses as professionals in their own right versus being like assistants to physicians. And this gave a lot of people, physicians, a lot of big feelings. But it wasn't just physicians who were mad. Nurses were mad at each other too. Education for nurses was changing, with more and more ADN and BSN prepared nurses entering the field in the 1950s than any previous decade. Previously, diploma programs had been the predominant training method for nurses, and this is where the tides were like starting to change and turn, and the ADN and BSN programs were slowly becoming more of a common option. This created a, well, my way is better than yours, Susan, and you suck type of catfight vibe that we really still proudly wear as a badge of honor to this day in nursing. So yay, traditions. So amongst this pool of angst, Nurses Day was born to boost the spirits of nurses who felt underappreciated and undervalued 80 years ago. I hope that person who created this is not around today to see how miserably their nice plan failed, but they might have been around to see when it became a whole week. Because in 1982, former President Ronald Reagan signed a proclamation establishing National Nurses Week as an annual event that begins on May 6th and ends on May 12th, the birthday of Florence Nightingale. How wonderful. Sadly, a whole week still didn't fix my feeling or most people's feelings on the issue, which brings us to our current assessment of the current situation. Why Nurses Week and probably all appreciation weeks should not have to exist. So here's what's going on to lead to those feelings. While Nurses Week is well-intentioned, it fails to address the real challenges and issues that nurses face on a daily basis. Things like having way too many patients to be able to care for them safely, being understaffed with constant forced overtime, increasing responsibilities amongst drawbacks on resources, and the list could go on, and you don't have to take my word for it. We have data. Yay, data. In early 2023, AMN Healthcare polled 800,000 nurses and asked them, how are things going really? And the results, they were not ideal. Only 15% of nurses employed in hospitals say that they will continue to work in their same job, like on their same unit, in a year. So if you have a unit with 100 nurses, that's 85 holes in a year. Red flag. Only 1/3 of nurses stated that they felt they had adequate time to actually provide care for patients safely. 4 in 5 nurses say that their jobs cause them significant stress and that it affects their overall health. And 94% of respondents reported there was a severe shortage of nurses in their workplace, and 80% said they expected it would only get worse. There are more ERs out there. I knew this was the profession for us, but I will leave that whole summary article of that data down below in case you also want to be sad. In that article, it just kind of assessed the state of nursing. It didn't even touch on other aspects that are coming into this conversation, like violence. 75% of all workplace violence everywhere happens in healthcare. 75%. I don't know anyone in healthcare that hasn't been at least verbally assaulted. And if you've worked in a hospital or long-term care or any acute care setting, I would be willing to bet that you've been hit by a patient or far worse. And yet, healthcare systems, for the most part, they are not doing anything to protect their employees or their other patients. The vibe in general, it's not good. So I think we can safely assess that we have a problem here, right? And before those of you, okay, I know there's some of you who aren't nurses and you're thinking, well, this is just a problem for nurses, not my problem. Allow my doom and gloom to wreck your day too. Because even if you are not a nurse, chances are you will interact with one of us at some point. We're everywhere. Or people you love might have this pleasure of meeting us. And if it's in an outpatient setting where the stakes are lower, an office, something like that, meeting a short-staffed nurse, it might make your day worse. It might be inconvenient, but it's something a good rant and like a tasty coffee can usually overcome and fix. But what if you encounter a short-staffed nurse when you're critically ill or your mom is critically ill? 94% of nurses report feeling short-staffed. You don't want that short-staffed nurse to be your nurse or your mom's nurse when the nurse is the only one keeping your body functioning. Short-staffed nurses miss things. They make more mistakes. They don't care for you the way you deserve. And short-staffed nurses see more patients die because of those things, which leads to more burnout and more nurses quitting and an endless worsening problem. Well, I think that's enough doom and gloom for the day. Yes. Now that we have thoroughly assessed the problem, let's come up with some diagnoses and see which one fits this whole debacle we're in the best. Starting with what healthcare systems think the problem is. Nurses. If you read pretty much anything anywhere, it's pretty clear that healthcare systems, they think the diagnosis of the problem is nurses. Nurses are actually the issue. They don't want to work. They're lazy. They ask for way too much. They cannot figure out how to write their names on whiteboards. They are not bending over backwards for their employer all the time, and therefore, they are the problem. And while that is a fascinating hypothesis for diagnosis of this issue, I just don't feel like it's the one that quite fits. Our second differential diagnosis here is nursing school. They aren't turning out enough students. Nursing school is the problem. And I like this angle, right? Mostly because I hate how we do nursing education here. And I would love to find a way to make nursing education the villain in almost every scenario. But alas, it turns out we have plenty of nurses graduating. How do we know this? Because we have plenty of nurses out there. But what we lack is nurses willing to work in our healthcare system. Because previously assessed the struggles we discussed, there's a lot of nurses out there who, like me, have found alternative uses for their nursing degrees besides direct patient care. So we have a hemorrhage of nurses leaving, and no amount of nursing school graduates is going to be able to fix this because, unfortunately, we have to treat the actual problem, and nursing schools are not the problem here. Now, my humble opinion, I think the real diagnosis, the real problem is our potential diagnosis number 3, that healthcare systems run on a profit over patient business model because they are at their core a business that needs to make money. And they aren't just trying to make like some money. They want to make a lot of it, which requires squeezing every penny you can out of your employees and your customers. cutting corners where you can, seeing how few nurses you can staff on a unit before too many people start dying and people start noticing, cutting back on resources because people made do during a pandemic and then hospitals saw huge profits when it turns out, oh, we just like cut corners and scrape by and have people do the absolute, like, how far can we push them? That actually gives us great profit margins. Let's just like keep that going, right? That whole mentality, because they would like to keep raking in their $1 million salaries and bonuses. So if I may be so bold, I think the real diagnosis here is that healthcare systems are just in general built on the premise of make as much money as you possibly can in this situation. Let me know what you think the diagnosis is down below. This is what I'm going to work with for the rest of this video. And that means we can now move on to treatment. So how do we fix the issue with the money-hungry healthcare system destroying our nurses' souls? Again, we have several options here. Everyone's putting forth their thoughts. Hospital admins believe that the answer to this whole issue is having Nurses Week, because perhaps if we give nurses some pizza, they will forget how we treat them. Or maybe they would like a rock that says, "You rock." Genius. I personally always loved the random like 1/8 of a stale donut I got for Nurses Week on night shift, because they, of course, the hospital delivered the donuts during the day shift, who then cut them up into 8 pieces for some unknown reason, because they're like, I couldn't possibly eat a whole donut. But then throughout the course of the day, ate 7/8 of the donut and left the one tiny like crusty bit for me on night shift that I could pair with my very old, cold, like slice of pizza that was only olives because no one wanted to eat that piece. That was my nursing experience. And then you go to the freezer to open it up and there's like, it's like ice cream is in the fridge. That's written on the door, and you open it and it's just the box. They took everything but the box. Do you see where my feelings about Nurses Week come from? But for real, I know some of you understand this trauma, and you've shared with me. I asked over on social media, I was like, what are some of your healthcare systems doing for your appreciation weeks? And some of the gems I thought I would share with you. A few of you had your hospital volunteer. You could sign up as a nurse to go and clean up trash or do yard work for your hospital to get you outside in the sunshine. It's good for your brain. Someone else was still boldly going with the decorate a rock theme. And you could go to the courtyard after your shift to decorate a rock because, you rock. Many healthcare systems were having nurses pay like $20 to buy a t-shirt that then they could wear under their scrubs on a certain dedicated day during the week. By the way, this was mandatory. You may not opt out. You have to buy the shirt even if you're not working this week. And I'm just thinking, you are literally making money off of Nurses Week. I hate you. It seems to be a theme this year that several Catholic hospitals, a lot of you were sending me, were having the whole event. The highlight of the event of the week was that someone would come around and pray for you, which I was like, is a very kind gesture if you are into that, but what? And last but not least, we can't forget potlucks, because those are a staple of culture within healthcare, right? But do you think the hospital will be giving you your potluck for Nurses Week? No. Monday, bring your favorite dip. Friday, bring your favorite chip. For Nurses Week, you supply the food, but we'll come up with the theme. How could we ever come up with the theme without you? But my personal overarching theme of all of these Nurses Week type things is hypocrisy. It's like for 1 week, management pretends they care. They put up a lot of posters, but nothing ever changes, right? And this isn't just a nursing problem. Teachers Appreciation Week, I'm pretty sure they would appreciate and prefer to make more money, make a livable wage, have a more manageable classroom size, have resources, make it so that they don't have to decorate their own classroom and pay for all of their classroom supplies. What? And going in a different vein, I'm pretty sure any history month or week, I think most people that are affected by those would probably rather there just be no racism or discrimination present that required that week to be made, or for there to be some kind of a systems change that helps reverse the consequences of all of those things, rather than just being here, you have a month, we'll learn about you, yay, fixes everything. Not. Appreciation days and weeks and months are only needed when there is a group of people that is being taken advantage of, and they serve as a temporary smokescreen to try to distract from the core issue of that celebrated group being taken advantage of and the world doing nothing about it. And we know they could do something about it, right? Because this is not universal across all fields, across all life. My husband is a software engineer. There was no software engineer appreciation month because in his field, he's allowed to take lunch. He is paid fairly. He can take the vacation time he earns when he would like it, and he is given resources that he needs to do his job. And if he dealt with any of the stuff that we talked about below, he would immediately quit, because the expectation in his industry is that you will be treated decently by your employer. Healthcare workers, teachers, social workers, anyone with jobs that like care for people, we've always been exploited, because usually people in those fields, like, we went into it because we tend to want to help people, even when there aren't enough resources to let us do that. So then we'll like try to just figure it out any way we can. There's also a lot of emotions in these jobs. It leads to immense burnout. And then we leave when we can't do those things. And no celebration, no matter how cool, would ever fix that problem. So dear healthcare systems, while your attempt at honoring nurses with Nurses Week is hilarious and perhaps even sometimes well-meant, your treatment, it isn't working. Please stop. Here's how I think we should treat this problem instead. This is a dream world. I just need you to roll with me for a second, okay? We staff hospitals appropriately, where nurses have a safe number of patients. We pay nurses a competitive salary for their area. We staff units appropriately so that nurses can actually use their time off. Go figure. We implement breaks so that people can eat lunch and normalize peeing while they are at work. We require everyone in healthcare management to have worked in healthcare in some capacity in a patient-facing role for at least, 3 years. We cap salaries of management. You don't need to be making millions of dollars over people dying, okay? We flip the whole system on its head so that we focus more on primary prevention and primary care versus our current model where we bank on everyone avoiding care because they can't afford it until they're actually dying. Then they land in the hospital where they're forced to pay all this money and deal with the issue because they're dying and can't get out of bed. But while I dream there for a moment, I don't think we'll be getting any of those things anytime soon. Here is a more realistic brain dump of things you can do to improve healthcare in this country. And remember that you too will be affected by the nursing concerns because you're mad just like me now. Remember? Good. You can support legislation that mandates staffing ratios for nurses and advocate for legislation that monetarily fines the heck out of hospitals when they don't comply. There's no punishment. There's no point in the law in general, right? Gotta always look for what's the punishment. I've seen some lately that have like literally no repercussions. I'm like, this was such a good idea. We were so close, but what's the point? Having mandated nursing ratios would improve safety a whole lot. And we know this because even though things aren't perfect in states like California where they have mandated ratios, they are better. Unions are also a great way to enforce safe staffing and other general benefits for nurses. If you work or live near hospitals that have unions, check them out and see what your peers are saying about those hospitals. Not all union hospitals are like great, but there are a lot of good ones. And I worked for a hospital with a nursing union my whole nursing career. And I was treated vastly better than my peers at neighboring non-union hospitals. We were much safer. We got paid better. We just had better benefits. It was just a better situation. My favorite tip of all time, that it's always fine, just in general with your career, to change your mind. Maybe about like literally your whole career, or maybe just what you're willing to put up with or what you want right now. Changing your mind is not a sign that you couldn't hack it. It just means that you are an evolving human and you want something different. And now, if you are a human who is in charge of making Nurses Week type things happen, I thought I would put a little list together of things that you could do for nurses, because I got a few of these questions when I asked on social media, like, what funny gifts did you give? Some people were like, I'm in charge of this. I don't want to give a crappy gift, but like, I don't know what to do. I thought we would make a little list for you. And side note, I do know that it's usually not the nurse managers or the educators or whoever gets stuck with doing Nurses Week that is the cause of this whole problem we've talked about today, right? So when I say management, I mostly mean like upper management, the ones making millions of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, them. Unless you're one of the people who may have the rock idea or that yell at people about whiteboards, then that was about you too. But here's a little list of things that could be awesome. You could do like a fancy new coffee maker with some coffee pods. You could just buy a ton of coffee so they don't have to drink like the actual dirt type of stuff that the hospital usually gives. Let's see. We could also do like a massage gun type thing. So like if people somehow have time, you could like massage your aching body that you get from the job that is quite physically demanding often. Now that I'm sitting here, I'm like, well, that's 2 ideas. I'm out. If it was me, I thought I had more in my head, but if it was me, I would honestly just make a list of things that you think your unit would enjoy and then have nurses vote. Like, what do you want? But I would pool the money and get one really cool thing or like semi-cool thing that everyone can use while they're there versus like 140-cent pens that no one wants and makes people feel degraded. Because people at the core here just want to feel seen and like an actual gesture. And we all know you're not getting enough money set aside from your upper management to do something really cool. So just pool the money and do something fun there. And if you have any other ideas of cool actual nursing gifts, please do leave them below. I'm also just in camp of like, don't even bother giving me anything when it comes to Nurses Week, because it's so obvious that healthcare systems only want to exploit nurses. And a week where we get like free popcorn is not going to fix it, and just kind of feels like a slap in the face. But some of you might be more cheerful and might have better ideas, so leave those down below. If you have a fun, like, here's what my hospital gave us story, or any, if you're a teacher or anyone who gets an appreciation week, if you have a fun story of what you got, leave that down below. If you have big feelings on the topic, if you think I'm a really grumpy villain, feel free to leave all those feelings down below and we can chat and debrief this together. Always remember that you, my friend, are not alone. There are lots of other grumpy people out there who hate these appreciation weeks. It's not us, it's them. You are more than enough, just as you are. And you can do hard things like getting through Nurses Week or whatever appreciation week you feel targeted by. Until next time, friends. Bye.